When Nathan Cross saw his 6-year-old daughter kneeling in the rain, her tiny body trembling like a dying leaf in the wind, he understood that he had made the greatest mistake of his life. He had trusted the wrong person. The iron gate of the North Ridge mansion stood before him, locked tight against the night. Rain poured down in sheets, soaking through his expensive coat, plastering his hair against his forehead. But Nathan felt nothing, not the cold, not the wet. Only the sight before him burned into his eyes like a brand. Emma, his little girl, his whole world. She was kneeling on the cobblestone courtyard wearing nothing but a thin white nightgown that clung to her skeletal frame. Mud streaked her pale arms. Her small hands clutched a tattered teddy bear against her chest, as if it were the only thing keeping her alive. The bear was old and worn, missing one eye, its fur matted with rain and tears. It was the last gift her mother had given her before cancer stole Sarah away 3 years ago. Nathan gripped the iron bars and pushed. The gate shrieked in protest, then swung open with a groan that echoed across the empty yard. Standing over Emma was Victoria, his wife, the woman he had married 18 months ago, believing she would be the mother his daughter needed. She wore a red evening gown that hugged her curves, her blonde hair perfectly styled despite the rain. In her manicured hand she held a glass of wine, swirling it casually as if she were at a cocktail party instead of watching a child suffer in a storm. Behind her stood William the butler, rigid as a statue. His face was blank. His eyes were empty. Nathan ran. His Italian leather shoes slipped on the wet stones. He did not care. He fell to his knees beside Emma, gathering her into his arms, wrapping his soaked coat around her shivering body. She was so cold, so impossibly cold. He could feel her ribs through the thin fabric of her nightgown, each bone pressing against his chest like an accusation. Emma looked up at him. Her eyes were red and swollen, filled with a mixture of fear and disbelief, as if she could not quite believe he was real, as if she had given up hoping he would ever come home. "Daddy." Her voice was barely a whisper, cracked and broken. "You came back." Nathan pressed her closer, feeling his heart shatter into 1,000 pieces. How long had she been out here? How many nights had she spent alone in the cold while he sat in his office in Zurich, signing papers worth millions, believing everything at home was fine? Victoria let out a small laugh, the kind of laugh people make when they want to pretend nothing is wrong. She took a sip of her wine and smiled, though her eyes remained cold as winter glass. "Darling, you are home early. I was just teaching the little one some manners. She spilled wine on the guest table tonight, and you know I simply cannot let that kind of behavior slide. Children need discipline." Nathan did not look at her. He kept his eyes on Emma, on the tiny face pressed against his shoulder, on the tears mixing with rain on her hollow cheeks. "Shut up." 2 words. That was all he said. But his voice carried something dangerous, something that made Victoria's smile falter for just a moment. The entire courtyard fell silent. Even the rain seemed to pause, holding its breath. William shifted his weight from one foot to the other, his eyes darting between Nathan and Victoria like a man calculating the safest path of retreat. Nathan rose to his feet, lifting Emma as if she weighed nothing at all. Her small body curled against him, her fingers gripping his shirt so tightly that her knuckles turned white. She was afraid to let go, afraid that if she loosened her grip even slightly, he would disappear again. He walked past Victoria without a glance. She reached out to touch his arm, her painted nails brushing against his sleeve. "Nathan, let us talk about this. You are overreacting." "She is fine. I would never actually hurt her." Nathan stopped. He did not turn around. His voice came out low and hard, each word falling like a hammer on stone. "If you touch my daughter again, I will destroy you." The wine glass slipped from Victoria's fingers. It shattered on the cobblestones, the red liquid spreading across the wet ground, like blood mixing with the rain pooling at their feet. Nathan kept walking. Behind him, Victoria stood frozen, her carefully constructed facade cracking at the edges. The rain continued to fall, washing away the wine, but not the stain of what had happened here. Not the stain of what Nathan had allowed to happen. But this story does not begin in the rain. It does not begin with a little girl kneeling on cold stone or a father running through the night. It begins 3 days earlier in a glass tower 6,000 miles away with a letter that would change everything. 3 days before the rain. Zurich, Switzerland. The executive suite on the 28th floor of Cross Holdings Europe smelled of a fresh paper and cold ambition. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of the city lights below, glittering like scattered diamonds against the black velvet of the Swiss night. It was beautiful. It was empty. It was exactly like Nathan's life had become. He sat alone at his desk, surrounded by documents worth hundreds of millions of dollars. The clock on the wall showed 2:17 in the morning, but Nathan had stopped paying attention to time months ago. Sleep was a luxury he could not afford. Not when the largest merger in company history was at stake. Not when the future of Cross Holdings depended on him being here in this office instead of home with his daughter. On the corner of his desk in a simple silver frame was a photograph. Nathan reached for it, his fingers brushing against the glass. The image showed a woman with gentle eyes and a warm smile, her arms wrapped around a little girl who was laughing at the camera. Sarah and Emma, taken 4 years ago during a summer vacation in Maine. Before the diagnosis, before the treatments, before the slow, agonizing goodbye that had torn his world apart. Nathan stared at the photograph, and for a moment he was back in that hospital room. Sarah's hand in his, her skin paper thin, her voice barely audible over the beeping machines. "Promise me, Nathan." Her eyes were already fading, but they locked onto his with desperate intensity. "Promise me you will always look into her eyes." Children cannot hide what they feel. Their eyes tell the truth even when their words do not. No matter what happens, protect our daughter. "Promise me, I promise." Nathan's voice had cracked. "I swear to you, Sarah. I will protect her with my life." Sarah smiled, then the last real smile he would ever see from her. And then she closed her eyes and she did not open them again. Nathan set the photograph down, rubbing his face with both hands. 3 years since that night. 3 years of drowning himself in work, of building an empire, of convincing himself that success would fill the void Sarah left behind. It did not. Nothing did. 1 year after the funeral, Victoria appeared. She was the public relations director for a partner company, brilliant and beautiful, with a smile that made investors trust her and a laugh that made Nathan feel something other than empty. She seemed to genuinely care about Emma, buying her expensive toys, taking her to the park, cooking elaborate dinners that filled the silent house with warmth and light. Nathan convinced himself he had found what Sarah wanted for their daughter. A mother, a family, a chance to heal. They married 6 months later in the garden of the Northridge mansion. Emma served as the flower girl, scattering white petals along the aisle, her small face bright with hope. Victoria knelt down and hugged her, whispering something that made Emma giggle. Nathan watched them together and felt for the first time since Sarah's death that everything might be okay. He was wrong. He was terribly, catastrophically wrong. But he did not know that yet, not until the letter arrived. A knock at the door pulled Nathan from his memories. Rebecca Hayes, his executive assistant, entered the office carrying a worn envelope. She was a sharp woman in her early 30s with intelligent eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor that Nathan had come to rely on through countless business crises. This came from the Chicago office. She placed the envelope on his desk. No stamp, no postmark, just a handwritten address. From someone named Dorothy Chen, a neighbor in Northridge. Nathan picked up the envelope. The paper was old, the edges stained, the corners bent, as if someone had folded and unfolded it many times before finally deciding to send it. The handwriting was shaky, the letters slanting unevenly across the surface like the script of someone whose hands trembled with age or fear. He opened it. The letter inside was written on plain white paper, the words scrawled in the unsteady hand of an elderly person. "Dear Mr. Cross, I am Mrs. Chen, and I have lived in the house east of your estate for 20 years. I am writing this letter with great hesitation, but I cannot stay silent any longer. My conscience will not allow it. Your daughter, little Emma, is being severely mistreated in her own home. I have witnessed her being forced to stand on the porch for hours at a time, regardless of weather. I have heard shouting through the fence, angry voices that make me flinch even from a distance. Yesterday, the child collapsed in front of the gate. She simply fell down as if her legs could no longer hold her weight. I knocked on your door to check on her, but your wife told me this is how wealthy families discipline their children." She smiled when she said it, Mr. Cross. She smiled as if it were nothing at all. "I do not know what is happening inside your house, but I know what I have seen, and I know that a child should not look that afraid. Please come home, for it is too late. Sincere, Dorothy Chen." Nathan read the letter once, then again, then a third time, his hands beginning to shake. The words blurred as something hot and terrible rose in his chest, a mixture of fear and rage, and desperate denial. He grabbed his phone and dialed the mansion. William answered after 4 rings, his voice formal and distant. "Good evening, Mr. Cross. How may I assist you? Where is Emma?" A pause, too long, too careful. "Miss Emma is studying, sir. Shall I fetch her?" "What about Mrs. Chen, the neighbor? Has she visited recently?" Silence stretched across the line like a wire pulled too tight. When William finally spoke, his voice was clipped and evasive. "I would not know, sir." Nathan ended the call without another word. Something was wrong. He could feel it in his bones, in the cold sweat forming on the back of his neck, in the way his heart had started pounding against his ribs like a caged animal trying to break free. Rebecca stood by the door, watching him with concern. "Is everything all right?" Nathan was already reaching for his coat. "Cancel all my meetings. Book the first flight to Chicago. The merger presentations are tomorrow morning. The board is expecting you to lead the discussion. If you leave now, the entire deal could fall apart." Nathan stopped, turning to face her. His expression made her fall silent immediately. "There are things more important than money, Rebecca. My daughter is one of them." On the flight across the Atlantic, Nathan did not sleep. He sat in the darkened cabin of the private jet, staring at his phone, scrolling through the photographs Victoria had sent over the past 3 months. Emma in the study books open before her. Emma at the dinner table, fork in hand. Emma smiling next to a birthday cake, candles glowing in the dim light. But now that Nathan looked closely, truly looked with the eyes of a father instead of a distracted businessman, he saw what he had missed before. The smile in every photograph was wrong. It did not reach Emma's eyes. Her gaze was always slightly off, looking down, or to the side, avoiding the camera, as if she were afraid of what it might capture. And in every single picture, Victoria stood just behind her, a hand on Emma's shoulder, perfectly positioned in the frame. Like a warden, not a mother. Nathan's phone buzzed. A text message from Marcus Webb, his personal attorney for the past decade. "Have you signed the transfer papers yet? Need immediate confirmation before Friday." Nathan stared at the message, confusion cutting through his growing dread. What transfer papers? In the 3 months he had been in Zurich, he had not approved any major asset transfers. He typed a reply with fingers that had begun to tremble. "What are you talking about?" "What papers?" Marcus did not respond. Nathan checked his calendar. Today was Tuesday. Marcus had mentioned needing confirmation before Friday. That gave him 72 hours to figure out what was happening. 72 hours to get home and protect his daughter from whatever nightmare had been unfolding in his absence. He looked out the window at the darkness below. Somewhere beneath those clouds was Chicago. Somewhere in that city was Emma, alone and afraid, waiting for a father who had been too busy chasing money to notice she was suffering. "I am coming, sweetheart." Nathan whispered the words to the empty cabin. "Hold on just a little longer. Daddy is coming." The plane landed at 9 in the evening Chicago time. Nathan rented a car and drove through sheets of rain, his windshield wipers beating a frantic rhythm against the downpour. The GPS guided him through familiar streets that suddenly felt foreign, past landmarks he had driven by 1,000 times but never really seen. His phone buzzed again. A text from Victoria. "Darling, I heard you are on your way home. Do not worry about that letter from the old neighbor. She is quite senile, always imagining things that are not there. Emma is perfectly fine. She misses you terribly. Kiss, kiss." Nathan read the message 3 times, his grip tightening on the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. How did Victoria know about the letter? He had not told anyone except Rebecca. He had not mentioned it in any message or call. Yet Victoria already knew. Already had an explanation prepared. Already was trying to smooth things over before he even arrived. The pieces were starting to connect, and the picture they formed made Nathan's blood run cold. The Northridge mansion appeared through the rain, its windows glowing with warm light that seemed obscene, given what Nathan now suspected was happening inside. He pulled up to the iron gate and found it locked. The security code he entered was rejected. They had changed it. They had changed the code to his own house. Nathan got out of the car, rain immediately soaking through his clothes. He walked to the gate, gripped the iron bars, and pushed with all his strength. The lock groaned under the pressure, then snapped. The gate swung open with a screech of tortured metal. And that is when he saw her. Emma, kneeling in the rain, clutching her one-eyed teddy bear, trembling like a leaf in a hurricane. Victoria standing over her with a glass of wine, looking annoyed rather than concerned. William watching from the shadows, doing nothing to help a suffering child. In that moment, everything Nathan had built, everything he had achieved, everything he had sacrificed for success meant nothing, absolutely nothing at all. He had failed the one promise that mattered, the promise he made to Sarah as she lay dying, the promise to protect their daughter. But it was not too late, not yet. He would make this right. He would find out the truth. He would punish everyone responsible for hurting his little girl, and he would never, ever leave Emma alone again. Nathan carried Emma inside past the servants who scattered at his approach like startled birds past the crystal chandeliers and priceless paintings that suddenly seemed grotesque in their luxury. He brought her to the guest room on the second floor, away from the master bedroom where Victoria slept, away from everything that had hurt her. Clara, the elderly nurse who had worked for the family since before Sarah's death, rushed out from the kitchen. Her face went pale when she saw Emma's condition. "Dear God, Mr. Cross, the child. Check her, now." Clara took Emma's small hand in hers, her experienced fingers feeling for pulse-checking temperature, examining the bruises that Nathan had not wanted to see but could no longer ignore. Faint purple marks circled Emma's wrists like bracelets of pain, evidence of restraints that no child should ever have to endure. Nathan's hands curled into fists so tight that his nails drew blood from his palms. He did not notice. He did not feel anything except the rage building inside him like a volcano preparing to erupt. "She is cold and hungry, but physically she will recover." Clara's voice was strained, professional words barely containing her horror. "These marks on her wrists are from being restrained. This has been happening for some time, sir. Weeks at least, perhaps longer." "How long?" Nathan's voice came out wrong, flat, dangerous. Clara could not meet his eyes. "Weeks, sir. Perhaps months." I tried to speak up. "I wanted to tell you, but Mrs. Cross said that if any of us contacted you about household matters, we would be dismissed immediately without references. I needed this job, Mr. Cross. I have grandchildren who depend on me. I am so sorry. I am so terribly sorry." Nathan wanted to be angry at her. He wanted to rage and scream and demand to know why no one had stopped this abuse. But when he looked at Clara's face, at the tears streaming down her weathered cheeks, he saw only another victim of Victoria's control. "Take care of Emma." He placed his hand on the old woman's shoulder. "You did the right thing by staying. Now I need you to keep her safe while I deal with this situation." Clara nodded, gathering Emma into her arms with the gentleness of a grandmother. The little girl was already half asleep, exhaustion finally claiming her, now that she felt safe in her father's presence. Nathan watched them disappear up the stairs, Emma's small hands still clutching the worn stuffed animal that had been her mother's final gift. Then he turned and walked to his study, his footsteps echoing through the silent house like the drumbeat of approaching war. The room felt wrong the moment he entered. Drawers were open, files were scattered across the floor. Documents that should have been locked in the safe were spread across the desk, their edges curling as if someone had been handling them carelessly and frequently. Nathan went to the safe and entered his combination. The door swung open, revealing stacks of legal papers inside. He pulled out the top folder and examined its contents with growing horror. Power of attorney, asset transfer authorization. Signature pages bearing his name. But the signatures were not his. The handwriting was close, almost perfect, but Nathan had signed his name a million times throughout his career. He knew every curve, every angle, every unconscious flourish of his own hand. These signatures were too neat, too careful, too deliberate. Written by someone who was copying rather than creating. Someone had been forging his signature. Someone had been using his identity to authorize transactions he knew nothing about. His phone rang, Rebecca calling from Zurich despite the late hour. "Nathan, I just finished reviewing the internal transaction system. There is a $47 million transfer to a fund called Falcon Trust. The fund is registered under Marcus Webb's name. Did you authorize this, Num?" Nathan's voice was ice. "I authorized nothing. There is more. If no one intervenes before Friday, another transaction is scheduled to go through. $120 million. Enough to give whoever controls that fund majority stake in Cross Holdings' domestic subsidiaries." "Nathan, someone is trying to steal your company." Nathan looked at the clock on his desk. Tuesday night, 11:47, 72 hours. He had 72 hours to stop whatever was happening. 72 hours to save his company. 72 hours to protect his daughter from the people who had been destroying her life while he was 6,000 miles away, blind and oblivious to her suffering. Freeze all subsidiary accounts immediately, Nathan commanded. And do not tell anyone what we have discussed. Not Marcus, not the board, no one. Trust no one until I figure out who is behind this. He ended the call and stood in the darkness of his study surrounded by evidence of betrayal. Victoria, Marcus, the forged signatures, the mysterious fund. It was all connected. He could feel the threads weaving together into a web of deception that had been spun right under his nose. But there was one more call he needed to make. Nathan found Mrs. Dorothy Chen's number in the local directory and dialed. She answered after many rings, her voice thin and trembling with age. "Who is this Mrs. Chen?" "This is Nathan Cross. I received your letter. I am home now." A long silence, then a shaky exhale of relief. "Thank God. I was afraid you would not read it. I was afraid no one would believe an old woman over a wealthy socialite. Tell me everything, Mrs. Chen. Please, I need to know what has been happening to my daughter." And she did. She told him about the time she had seen Emma standing on the porch for hours, forbidden to move, forbidden to sit, forced to endure whatever weather the sky chose to deliver. She told him about the shouting that echoed across the property, Victoria's voice sharp and cruel like the crack of a whip. She told him about the day Emma collapsed in front of the gate, her small body crumpling like a puppet with cut strings, and how Victoria had simply watched without moving to help. "But there is something else, Mr. Cross." The old woman's voice dropped to a whisper as if she feared being overheard even in her own home. "There is a man who visits frequently. Brown hair, always carrying a leather briefcase. He comes to your house often, sometimes staying for hours behind closed doors. They go into your office together and do not come out for a very long time. I do not know what they are doing in there, but I know it is not right. Did you catch his name? I only heard your wife call him once. She called him Marcus." Nathan thanked her and ended the call. He stood alone in his study staring at the scattered papers, the open drawers, the evidence of a conspiracy that had been unfolding right under his nose while he focused on building his empire. Marcus Webb, his lawyer, the man he had trusted with his most sensitive legal matters for the past decade. The man who had helped him draft his will, his prenuptial agreement with Victoria, his most important contracts. The man who had apparently been forging his signature to steal his company while his wife tortured his daughter. As Nathan searched through the scattered papers, his hand brushed against something soft wedged behind the filing cabinet. He pulled it out and felt his heart stop completely. It was a teddy bear, brand new, still wrapped in cellophane with a pink ribbon tied around its neck. A small card was attached, the handwriting achingly familiar. "Happy 6th birthday, my little sunshine. I will always love you even when I am gone. Love forever, Mommy Sarah." The date on the card was 8 months ago. Sarah had bought this gift before she died, had hidden it away to be given to Emma on her 6th birthday. And someone, Victoria, most likely had found it and thrown it behind the cabinet like garbage, rather than give a grieving child her dead mother's final gift. Emma had never received this bear. She had celebrated her birthday without knowing that her mother had loved her enough to plan ahead to reach beyond death with one last embrace. Nathan clutched the bear against his chest, tears streaming down his face for the first time since Sarah's funeral. This small act of cruelty, more than anything else, showed him exactly who Victoria really was. A woman utterly without conscience. A woman who would steal a dead mother's last gift to her child without a moment of hesitation. He would make sure Emma received this bear, and he would make sure Victoria paid for every moment of pain she had caused. Nathan picked up his phone one more time and dialed a number he had not called in years. Carter Mills, former FBI special agent, private investigator, and the closest thing Nathan had to a father since his own parents passed away. Carter had worked with Nathan's father back in the 80s, and he had watched Nathan grow from a stubborn teenager into a ruthless businessman. He was 62 years old now, sharp as a razor, and absolutely relentless when hunting prey. "Carter, it is Nathan Cross. I need your help. This is personal, but there is money involved. A lot of money. And my daughter's life may be at stake." Carter's voice was gravelly and alert despite the late hour. "I will be there tomorrow morning. Keep everything exactly as it is. Do not touch anything. Do not confront anyone. And Nathan, this is important. Do not let them know you suspect anything. Let them think they are still winning. Predators get careless when they think they have already caught their prey." Nathan agreed and hung up. He walked to the window and looked out at the rain still falling over North Ridge, at the dark silhouette of Mrs. Chen's house in the distance, at the city lights of Chicago, glowing on the horizon like a promise of justice waiting to be fulfilled. 62 hours left until Friday. 62 hours to uncover the truth, gather evidence, and destroy the people who had betrayed him. 62 hours to save his daughter and reclaim his life from the thieves who had stolen it. The clock was ticking, and Nathan Cross had never lost a fight he truly cared about winning. Upstairs, Emma slept peacefully for the first time in months, her small hand clutching the faded one-eyed bear that smelled of lavender and memories of her mother. In her dreams, she was running through a field of sunflowers, laughing with Sarah by her side, and Nathan chasing behind them, all three of them together again under a golden summer sun. She did not know about the storm that was coming. She did not know about the battles her father would have to fight. She only knew that he was home, that he had come back for her when she had almost given up hope. And sometimes that is enough. Sometimes that is everything. Everything. Wednesday morning arrived with a pale gray light that seemed to drain all color from the world. Nathan had not slept. He sat in the leather chair beside Emma's bed, watching his daughter breathe, counting each rise and fall of her small chest, as if it were a precious gift he did not deserve. Sometime during the night, Emma had reached out in her sleep and found his hand, her tiny fingers wrapped around his thumb, holding on with a desperate strength that broke his heart all over again. Even in her dreams, she was afraid of being abandoned. Even in sleep, she needed to know he was still there. At 7 o'clock sharp, the doorbell rang. Carter Mills stood on the front porch, rain dripping from his long gray coat. He was a tall man, lean and weathered by decades of chasing criminals and uncovering secrets, with silver hair, cropped short, and eyes that had seen too much darkness to be fooled by anything. A black briefcase hung from his left hand, worn smooth by years of use. He did not smile when Nathan opened the door. He simply nodded once and stepped inside with the quiet confidence of a man who had walked into danger many times before. "Show me everything." Nathan led him to the study. The scattered papers remained exactly where he had found them the night before, untouched, per Carter's instructions. The former FBI agent moved through the room with practiced efficiency, photographing documents, scanning signatures, examining every detail with the focused intensity of a predator studying its prey. After 20 minutes of careful analysis, Carter finally spoke. "The signatures are forgeries." He held up a magnified image on his tablet, created using electronic pen technology. Very sophisticated, very expensive. Whoever did this had access to samples of your handwriting and the resources to replicate it almost perfectly. Almost, Carter pointed to a subtle inconsistency in the letter formation. "The pressure points are wrong. When you sign your name, you press harder at the beginning of each stroke. These signatures show uniform pressure throughout. It is the kind of mistake only an expert would catch, but it is enough to prove fraud in court." Nathan stared at the evidence of his own betrayal. "Can we prove it conclusively?" "With time, yes. I will need 48 hours to complete a full forensic analysis and produce documentation that will hold up legally. But based on what I am seeing here, you have a solid case." Nathan glanced at the clock on his desk. "We do not have 48 hours. The next transaction is scheduled for Friday at noon, $120 million. If that transfer goes through, they win." Carter closed his briefcase, his expression grim but determined. "Then we need to move faster. Tell me about the players. Who are we dealing with?" Nathan sat down heavily in his chair. The exhaustion of the sleepless night was beginning to pull at him, but he pushed through it. His daughter needed him. His company needed him. He could sleep when this nightmare was over. "Marcus Webb is my personal attorney. He has handled my legal affairs for 10 years. I trusted him with everything. Contracts, mergers, my will. He knows where every piece of paper in my life is filed. And now he appears to be stealing from you. The forged signatures are being used to authorize transfers to something called Falcon Trust. Rebecca confirmed that Falcon Trust is registered under Marcus's name." Carter pulled out his laptop and began typing rapidly. Within minutes, his expression darkened considerably. "Falcon Trust is a shell company registered in Delaware. Marcus Webb is listed as the legal representative, but he is not the real owner." He turned the screen toward Nathan. "The actual beneficiary is another entity called Vertex Capital." Nathan leaned forward, dread pooling in his stomach like ice water. "Who owns Vertex Capital?" Carter clicked once more and a name appeared on the screen. Richard Kane. The room seemed to tilt beneath Nathan's feet. He gripped the edge of his desk, his knuckles turning white from the pressure. Richard Kane. His partner. His friend. The man who had stood beside him for 20 years building Cross Holdings, from nothing celebrating victories and surviving failures together. That is not possible. Nathan's voice came out hollow and disbelieving. Richard and I started this company together. We were 22 years old working out of a garage with more dreams than money. He was best man at my wedding to Sarah. He held Emma the day she was born and cried with joy. Carter's eyes held no sympathy, only cold understanding, born from years of investigating human nature at its worst. Money and power can transform anyone, Nathan. I have seen brothers betray brothers for less than what Cross Holdings is worth. The question is not whether Richard is involved. The evidence makes that clear. The question is how deep this conspiracy goes and how we stop it before Friday. Nathan stood abruptly, walking to the window. Outside, the gray morning had given way to a light drizzle, the kind of rain that seemed to seep into everything, dampening spirits and drowning hope. Richard introduced me to Victoria. The realization hit him like a physical blow to the chest. 2 years ago at a charity gala, he said she was brilliant, said she would be good for me after Sarah died. He practically pushed us together, arranged for us to sit next to each other, made excuses to leave us alone. Carter nodded slowly, the pieces falling into place. So this was planned from the beginning. Victoria was not a random encounter or a happy coincidence. She was placed in your life deliberately to gain access to your household, your finances, your trust. And my daughter. Nathan's hands curled into fists at his sides. They put Emma through hell to keep me distracted and compliant. Every time I called home, Victoria had some excuse for why Emma could not talk long. Some story about how busy she was with school or activities. And I believed her. I believed every single word because I wanted to believe that everything was fine. The guilt threatened to swallow him whole. 3 months in Zurich, working himself to exhaustion while his daughter was being tortured. 3 months of missed calls and quick texts and promises to come home soon. 3 months of putting business before family, just as he always had. Sarah would never forgive him. He would never forgive himself. We need to move carefully. Carter's voice cut through Nathan's spiral of self-recrimination. If Richard and Victoria realize you are onto them, they will accelerate their timeline or destroy evidence. We need to gather everything we can before they know we are hunting them. Nathan turned from the window, his expression hardening into something cold and determined. Then we set a trap. We let them think they are winning while we build an airtight case. For the next 2 hours, Nathan and Carter developed their strategy. Step 1 was surveillance. Nathan retrieved a set of miniature cameras that Victoria had once dismissed as unnecessary for a private residence. He installed them throughout the house in the living room, the hallway outside his study door, positioning each device to capture every angle without being detected. Step 2 was intelligence gathering. Carter reached out to his network of former FBI contacts, requesting background checks on Victoria, Marcus, and Richard. Within hours, disturbing details began to emerge from the databases. Victoria's maiden name was not her real name. She had changed it legally 7 years ago, bearing a past that included 2 previous marriages, both to wealthy older men, both ending in divorce with substantial settlements in her favor. There were also whispered allegations of elder abuse from the family of her first husband, though no charges were ever filed due to lack of evidence. Marcus Webb had significant gambling debts that he had been hiding for years. His lifestyle far exceeded what his legal practice could support, and several of his investment accounts showed suspicious deposits that did not match any legitimate income sources. He was drowning in debt and desperate for a lifeline. And Richard Kane had been quietly acquiring shares in Cross Holdings subsidiary companies for the past 18 months, using a maze of shell corporations to hide his purchases from regulatory oversight. He had been planning this betrayal for nearly 2 years, long before Victoria ever entered Nathan's life. The picture was becoming clearer, and it was uglier than Nathan had ever imagined. Late Wednesday afternoon, Sophie appeared at his study door. She was the new housekeeper hired just 2 weeks before Nathan left for Zurich. Young, quiet, with dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, and nervous eyes that seemed to notice everything while pretending to notice nothing. Nathan had barely spoken to her before his departure, dismissing her as just another member of the household staff. Now she stood in the doorway of his study, clutching something small in her trembling hands. Mr. Cross, I have something for you. Her voice was barely above a whisper. I found it in the storage room behind some old boxes. I think it is important. She opened her palm, revealing a small USB drive. Nathan took it carefully. What is this? I think it is a backup of the security camera footage, from before the files were erased from the main system. Sophie's eyes darted toward the hallway, checking for listeners. I saw Miss Emma's name in the folder directory. I did not watch it. I was too afraid of what I might see. But I think you need to know what is on there. Nathan studied her face, searching for signs of deception, but finding only genuine concern. Why are you helping me? You barely know us. Sophie was silent for a long moment, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. Then she spoke, her voice thick with suppressed emotion and old pain. I have a younger sister. When we were children, my stepfather used to hurt her. The same way Mrs. Cross hurts Emma. The same cruelty hidden behind closed doors. I could not stop it then. I was too small, too weak, too scared of what he might do to me if I spoke up. Sophie's hands trembled at her sides. But I am not a child anymore, Mr. Cross, and I will not stand by silently while another little girl suffers the way my sister did. Nathan reached out and placed his hand on Sophie's shoulder. She flinched at first, then steadied herself. Thank you. His voice was rough with gratitude. What you are doing is brave and dangerous. If Victoria finds out you helped me, she will not. Sophie lifted her chin, a flash of steel appearing in her dark eyes. I have been invisible to her since the day I arrived. She does not see servants as people worth noticing. She only sees tools to be used. That is her weakness, and it will be her downfall. After Sophie left, Nathan inserted the USB drive into his computer. The screen flickered, then displayed a list of video files, each one dated and time-stamped, covering the 3 months he had been in Zurich. He clicked on the first file with a sense of dread. The living room appeared on screen, filmed from a high angle in the corner. Victoria stood in the center of the frame, arms crossed, face twisted with anger. William waited beside her, rigid and expressionless as always. Before them, Emma stood with her head bowed, her small body trembling like a leaf in a storm. Nathan watched as his daughter accidentally knocked over a glass of water. The glass shattered on the hardwood floor, and Emma immediately dropped to her knees, trying to gather the broken pieces with her bare hands, desperate to fix her mistake. Victoria stepped forward and slapped her across the face. The sound of the impact crackled through the computer speakers like a gunshot. Emma fell backward, her cheek already reddening. She did not cry out. She did not scream. She simply lay there, staring up at her stepmother, with eyes that held no surprise, only weary resignation. As if this happened every day. Because it did. Nathan's hands gripped the edge of his desk so hard that the wood creaked in protest. His vision blurred with rage, with grief, with a hatred so pure and absolute that it terrified him. He forced himself to keep watching. The second video showed Marcus entering Nathan's study through the side door. Victoria accompanied him, her demeanor completely transformed from the cruel tyrant of the previous footage. She was smiling, laughing, leaning close to Marcus as he opened the safe and removed folders of documents with practiced ease. Just sign them, and everything will be ours. Victoria's voice was light, almost playful. He will never know the difference. By the time he realizes what happened, we will be long gone with enough money to live like royalty for the rest of our lives. Marcus grinned, pulling her close for a brief embrace. You really are something special. You know that Richard was right about you. Richard chose well. Victoria kissed him briefly. Now finish the paperwork. We are running out of time, and I want this done before he decides to come home early. The third video destroyed whatever remained of Nathan's composure. Emma sat alone in a dark hallway at 3 in the morning, knees pulled to her chest, arms wrapped around herself for warmth and comfort. She was crying without sound, her shoulders shaking, her face buried against the faded fur of her one-eyed teddy bear. From somewhere off camera, Victoria's voice echoed through the sleeping house like a curse. If you make any noise, I will throw that disgusting bear in the garbage. Do you understand me? Nod if you understand. Emma nodded frantically, pressing her face harder into the bear's worn fur. Her lips moved in a silent whisper that the camera barely captured, words meant only for the mother who could no longer hear them. Mommy, Sarah, I miss you. Please come back. Please make it stop. I will be good, I promise. Just please come back. Nathan slammed his laptop shut. His chest heaved. Tears streamed down his face, hot and bitter. He had not cried since Sarah's funeral. He had thought himself beyond tears, hardened by grief and loss and the cold necessities of business. He was wrong about that too. Carter appeared in the doorway, alerted by the sound of the laptop closing. His expression softened slightly when he saw Nathan's face. That bad Nathan could not speak. He simply nodded, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. Carter walked over and placed a hand on his shoulder, a gesture of solidarity from one man who had seen too much darkness to another. We have what we need: video evidence of child abuse, financial fraud, conspiracy to commit theft. This is enough to put all of them away for years. It is not enough. Nathan's voice came out ragged and raw. I want them to suffer. I want them to feel what Emma felt. I want them to understand exactly what they did to my daughter. Carter squeezed his shoulder. You will have your justice, Nathan. But first, we need to be smart about this. We need to catch them in the act with witnesses and documentation that they cannot possibly deny. And for that, we need them to believe they are still winning. Nathan took a deep breath, forcing the rage back down, locking it away in a cold place where it could fuel him without consuming him. What do you suggest? Carter smiled, a thin and dangerous expression that had made many criminals nervous over the years. Victoria is throwing herself a birthday party tomorrow night. Every major investor and board member will be there. It is the perfect stage for a confrontation. Nathan understood immediately. She wants to show everyone that our family is strong and united, that Cross Holdings is stable, that there is nothing to worry about. Exactly. And we are going to let her have her party. We are going to smile and shake hands and pretend everything is fine. Carter's eyes glittered with anticipation. And then when she feels most confident, most secure, most convinced that she has already won, we are going to tear it all down around her. Thursday morning began with disaster. Nathan woke to his phone buzzing with dozens of notifications. Rebecca's name flashed across the screen with urgent priority. Nathan, we have a serious problem. Her voice was tight with barely contained panic. Someone leaked a story to the Chicago Tribune overnight. The headline reads, Cross Holdings in crisis, CEO absent, while company hemorrhages money. They are painting you as an absentee leader who abandoned his responsibilities to chase deals overseas. Nathan felt his jaw tighten. Let me guess. The source is anonymous. Worse, there are quotes attributed to unnamed board members expressing grave concern about your mental stability and judgment. They are suggesting that grief over your first wife's death has affected your decision-making. And Nathan, there is more. There is a photograph of Emma being led into the mansion by police officers. It is fake, clearly photoshopped by anyone who looks closely, but it is already going viral on social media. Cross Holdings stock had dropped 12% in pre-market trading. Investors were flooding phone lines demanding explanations. Emergency board meetings were being scheduled without Nathan's input, and Richard Kane had already released a public statement offering to temporarily assume executive control to protect shareholders during this difficult time. They are trying to destroy my reputation before I can expose them. Nathan said, his voice cold with understanding. And it is working, Rebecca replied grimly. The board is panicking. You have maybe 48 hours before they vote on an emergency measure to suspend your executive authority. If that happens, Richard automatically becomes acting CEO with full control over all pending transactions. Nathan looked at Carter, who had been listening on speakerphone. The old investigator's face was set in hard lines. They are accelerating, Carter said quietly. They know something is wrong. We need to move our timeline up. Can we be ready by tonight? We will have to be. Carter began packing his equipment with urgent efficiency. I will have my team in position by 8. Whatever happens at that party, we end this tonight. Thursday evening arrived with unexpected sunshine, as if the universe were mocking the darkness about to unfold. The North Ridge mansion gleamed with light and carefully arranged luxury. White lilies lined the entrance, their sweet scent masking the rot that lurked beneath the surface. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbow patterns across marble floors, polished to mirror shine. A string quartet played softly in the corner, their elegant music providing a soundtrack of false sophistication. Victoria stood in the center of the main hall, radiant in a silver gown that hugged her figure perfectly. Her blonde hair was swept up in an elaborate arrangement, diamond earrings catching the light with every movement of her head. She greeted guests with warm smiles and gracious words, the picture of a devoted wife and generous hostess. Watching her performance made Nathan sick to his stomach. He stood on the second-floor balcony, observing the party below like a general surveying a battlefield before the decisive engagement. Richard Kane worked the room with practiced charm, laughing with shareholders clapping backs, exuding the confidence that had helped build Cross Holdings into a billion-dollar empire. Marcus Webb lingered near the bar, checking his phone every few minutes, visible tension in the set of his shoulders. And in the corner, almost invisible among the glittering crowd, Emma sat on a small chair, clutching her constant companion, the faded teddy bear that held her secrets. She wore a blue dress that was slightly too big for her thin frame, her hair brushed but lifeless, her eyes fixed on the floor as if she wished she could disappear into it. Sophie stood nearby carrying a tray of champagne glasses, her gaze never straying far from the little girl they had sworn to protect. Victoria spotted Nathan on the balcony and made her way up the curved staircase, her smile brightening as she approached. "There you are, darling. Everyone is asking for you." She reached for his arm, her touch light and possessive. "Come down and say hello. We need to present a united front, especially after all those terrible rumors in the press." Nathan allowed himself to be led down the stairs, his expression carefully neutral despite the rage burning beneath the surface. Victoria introduced him to investors, praised his business acumen, laughed at jokes that were not funny. She played the role of adoring wife with practiced perfection. But Nathan noticed things he had been too blind to see before. The way her smile never quite reached her eyes, the subtle tension in her grip on his arm, the quick glances she exchanged with Marcus across the room whenever she thought Nathan was not looking. They were nervous despite their confident performances. They thought they were winning, but something was making them uneasy. Good. Halfway through the evening, Nathan excused himself and walked directly toward Richard Kane. Richard turned as he approached, his face splitting into the familiar grin that Nathan had once trusted completely. "Nathan, great to see you back, buddy. I heard the Zurich deal hit some rough patches. Anything I can do to help?" "Nothing I could not handle." Nathan kept his voice casual, his expression friendly. "But I have been hearing some interesting things about the domestic operations while I was away. Something about a fund called Falcon Trust." The grin on Richard's face flickered just for a moment, a crack in the carefully maintained facade. Falcon Trust, that is one of the investment vehicles Marcus proposed a few months back. "Routine stuff. I thought you had signed off on it before you left." "I never signed anything related to Falcon Trust," Nathan said, watching Richard's reaction closely. Richard's eyes narrowed slightly, but his smile remained fixed in place. "Must be some miscommunication then. You know how these things get lost in the shuffle when you are traveling constantly. I am sure Marcus can sort out the paperwork." As if summoned by his name, Marcus appeared at Richard's elbow, a glass of whiskey in hand. He looked pale beneath his tan, sweat beading at his hairline despite the air conditioning. "Nathan, good to see you back in Chicago. Is there some kind of problem I should know about?" Nathan studied both men, his oldest friend and his trusted lawyer, and saw nothing but strangers wearing familiar faces, predators hiding behind masks of friendship and professional loyalty. "No problem, just some questions about paperwork that can wait. We can discuss it later after the party." He turned and walked away, leaving them standing together in uneasy silence, their eyes meeting briefly in shared concern. Victoria intercepted him near the dessert table, her smile tight with poorly concealed anxiety. "What was that about? I saw you talking to Richard and Marcus. They both looked upset when you walked away." "Business matters." Nathan selected a chocolate truffle from the silver display, examining it with calculated disinterest. "Nothing that concerns you. Everything about this family concerns me." Victoria's voice dropped, losing its sweetness. "I am your wife, Nathan. Whatever affects you affects me too." Nathan finally looked at her directly. For a long moment he said nothing, letting the silence stretch until her composure began to crack at the edges. Then he smiled, a cold smile that did not touch his eyes at all. "You are absolutely right, Victoria. Everything is connected, and soon everyone in this room will understand exactly how connected it all is." He walked away, leaving her standing alone with fear beginning to bloom behind her carefully painted mask. Later that night, after the last guests had departed and the servants had cleaned the remnants of the party, Nathan sat in his study reviewing the footage from the hidden cameras. The party had been captured from multiple angles. Every conversation, every glance, Every whispered exchange was now documented and preserved. But the most valuable recording came from after midnight when Victoria believed everyone was asleep. The camera in the living room showed her meeting with Marcus and Richard in the basement-level wine cellar, a private space that Nathan rarely used. Their voices were muffled, but still audible through the sensitive microphone. The transaction goes through Friday at noon. Richard's voice was tense with barely controlled anxiety. Once the funds transfer, we will have controlling interest in the domestic subsidiaries. Nathan will be reduced to a figurehead with no real power, and we can push him out entirely within 6 months. What about the girl? Marcus asked, glancing toward the ceiling, as if Emma might somehow hear them through the floors above. Victoria's laugh was cold and dismissive. She serves her purpose for now. Keeps Nathan off balance emotionally, gives me leverage if I need it. Once we have control of the company, we can discuss her future more permanently. Richard leaned forward, his expression hardening. We need to move faster than planned. He is suspicious. I saw the way he looked at me tonight during our conversation. He knows something. Relax. Victoria poured herself a glass of wine with steady hands. He does not know anything concrete. He is just paranoid because of that stupid letter from the senile old woman next door. I already told him she imagines things. And if he finds actual proof of what we have been doing. Victoria's smile turned cruel in the dim light of the wine cellar. Then we proceed with the contingency plan we discussed. Accidents happen, Richard, especially to little girls who have already lost their mothers. One more tragedy would hardly be surprising. Nathan stopped the recording. His hands were shaking, not with fear, with rage so pure and overwhelming that he could barely breathe. They were not just stealing his company. They were threatening to hurt Emma, to kill her if necessary to protect their scheme. The phone rang, shattering the silence. Sophie's number appeared on the screen. Mr. Cross. Her voice was a terrified whisper. They have Emma. They took her to the laundry room in the basement and locked the door from the outside. I can hear her crying through the walls, but I cannot get to her without them seeing me. Nathan was already moving, grabbing his coat, his phone, his keys. Stay where you are and stay hidden. Do not let them see you. I am coming. He called Carter as he ran to his car. Change of plans. We move tonight. Right now, get your team to Northridge immediately. They have my daughter locked in the basement. Carter's response was immediate and focused. We are 20 minutes out. Nathan, listen to me carefully. Wait for backup. Do not go in alone. But Nathan was already driving tires, screaming on wet pavement, racing through the dark streets toward his daughter. 22 hours until the transaction. 22 hours until Richard and Victoria took everything he had built. But Nathan was done waiting, done playing their games, done letting the people he trusted destroy everything he loved. Tonight, one way or another, this ended. The mansion loomed against the night sky as Nathan pulled up to the gate. No lights were visible in the front windows. The party decorations had been cleared away, leaving only shadows and silence. He cut the engine and stepped out into the cold air. Carter and his team would arrive soon, but Nathan could not wait another moment. Every second Emma spent locked in that basement was a second too long. He moved through the darkness, circling the house to the servants' entrance that Sophie had left unlocked as planned. The door opened without a sound. Nathan slipped inside, his heart pounding, his senses hyper alert. The basement stairs lay ahead, descending into blackness. Nathan pulled out his phone, using its dim light to guide his way down. Each step creaked beneath his weight, announcing his presence to anyone who might be listening. He did not care. Let them hear him coming. Let them know that the hunter had become the hunted. At the bottom of the stairs, a narrow hallway stretched into shadow. Nathan moved forward, checking each door until he reached the last one. The laundry room. A heavy padlock secured the door from outside. Nathan grabbed a fire extinguisher from the wall mount and swung it at the lock with all his strength. Once, twice, 3 times. The metal gave way with a shriek of twisted steel. Nathan yanked the door open. Emma sat huddled in the corner of the dark room, her arms wrapped around her knees, her beloved teddy bear crushed against her chest. She looked up at him with eyes wide with terror, then recognition, then overwhelming relief. Daddy Nathan dropped to his knees and folded her into his embrace. She was cold, trembling, her small body shaking with suppressed sobs. I am here, sweetheart. I am here now. No one is ever going to hurt you again. I promise you that. Emma clung to him, her face buried in his neck, her tears soaking through his shirt. I was so scared, Daddy. They said they were going to send me away forever. They said you were never coming back for me. Nathan pressed her closer, feeling his heart crack and reform into something harder, something forged by fury and love in equal measure. I will always come back for you, Emma. Always. No matter what happens, no matter where you are, I will find you. He lifted her in his arms and carried her up the basement stairs. Sophie met them at the top, her face pale with relief. Take her to Mrs. Chen's house immediately. Nathan transferred Emma into Sophie's waiting arms. Stay there until I call you. Do not let anyone else near her, no matter what they say. Sophie nodded, wrapping a warm blanket around Emma's trembling shoulders. What are you going to do? Nathan turned toward the living room, where he could hear voices rising in heated argument. I am going to end this. Tonight. He walked through the darkened hallway past the abandoned party decorations toward the light spilling from the main living area. Victoria's voice carried through the door, sharp with anger and fear. This is falling apart, Richard. He knows something. We need to accelerate the timeline and get out now before it is too late. Nathan pushed the door open. Victoria spun around, her face going white as paper. Richard Kane froze mid-sentence, his mouth still open. Marcus Webb dropped his glass of whiskey, the amber liquid splashing across the pristine marble floor. Standing behind them, Carter Mills and 3 of his associates blocked the back exit. Their arrival had been silent and professional, exactly as planned. It is over. Nathan's voice was calm, controlled, utterly cold. All of it, right now. Victoria tried to recover her composure, forcing a smile that looked more like a grimace. Nathan, darling, what is this about? We were just discussing business strategy for tomorrow. Nathan pulled out his phone and pressed play. The recording from the basement meeting filled the room with their own voices. Victoria's voice discussing the transaction, Richard's voice expressing concern about Nathan's suspicions, and then the worst of it. Then we proceed with the contingency plan. Accidents happen, Richard, especially to little girls who have already lost their mothers. The color drained from Victoria's face completely. Marcus backed toward the wall, his hands raised in surrender. Richard stood frozen, his expression shifting from shock to calculation to desperate acceptance as he realized there was no way out. Carter stepped forward, holding up the documents his team had seized from the wine cellar. These papers authorize the fraudulent transfer of company assets. The signatures are forgeries confirmed by forensic analysis. We have video evidence of the falsification process along with recordings of all 3 of you discussing the conspiracy. Nathan walked toward Victoria, stopping just feet away from the woman he had once believed loved him. His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. You hurt my daughter. You tortured a 6-year-old child for months while I was away. You made her believe she was worthless, that she deserved to be punished, that no one would ever come to save her. Victoria's carefully constructed mask finally shattered completely. Tears streamed down her face, though Nathan could not tell if they were genuine or just another manipulation. Nathan, please. I never meant to actually harm her. It was just discipline. I was trying to control the situation so our plan would work. Richard said we needed to keep you distracted, and I did not know what else to do. Richard turned on her immediately. Do not put this on me. You were the one who suggested using the child as leverage. You said it would keep him too worried about home to notice what was happening with the company finances. That is a lie, Victoria screamed, all pretense of elegance abandoned. You planned this entire thing from the very beginning. You introduced me to Nathan specifically because you needed someone inside his house. Marcus tried to edge toward the door, but one of Carter's men blocked his path with a firm hand on his chest. The sound of sirens cut through the night. Blue and red lights flashed through the windows, painting the walls in alternating colors of justice finally arriving. Police officers entered the mansion moments later. Carter handed over the evidence he had compiled, the recordings, the documents, the forensic analysis of the forged signatures. One by one, Victoria, Marcus, and Richard were read their rights and led away in handcuffs. As Victoria passed Nathan, she stopped. The woman who had pretended to love him, who had wormed her way into his family, who had tortured his daughter for months while he worked himself to exhaustion 6,000 miles away. You will regret this. Her voice was poison wrapped in silk. I will make sure of it, Nathan. This is not over. Nathan looked at her, really looked, and felt nothing but cold satisfaction. The only thing I regret is that I did not see through you sooner. But you made one fatal mistake, Victoria. You underestimated how far a father will go to protect his child. The police led her away into the flashing lights. Nathan stood in the doorway watching until the cars disappeared down the long driveway and the sound of the sirens faded into the distance. Behind him, Carter placed a weathered hand on his shoulder. It is done. They will be charged with fraud, forgery, conspiracy, and child endangerment. Victoria will face the harshest sentence because of what she did to Emma. Nathan nodded slowly, exhaustion finally beginning to pull at him. What about the transaction? Frozen completely. Rebecca coordinated with the bank to halt all pending transfers the moment we had confirmation of the arrests. Your company is safe. Nathan turned away from the door. His company, his empire. The thing he had spent 20 years building, sacrificing everything for missing his daughter's childhood for. Right now it meant nothing at all. He walked to the phone and dialed Sophie's number. Bring Emma home. 20 minutes later, his daughter was back in his arms. She was still trembling, still scared, still clutching the faded teddy bear that was her last connection to Sarah. But when she looked up at Nathan, there was something new in her eyes. Hope. Is it over, Daddy? Are the bad people gone forever? Nathan kissed her forehead, holding her close. Yes, sweetheart. The bad people are gone, and they are never coming back. Emma nodded against his chest, her small body finally beginning to relax. I knew you would come for me, she whispered. Mommy, Sarah told me in my dreams. She said Daddy always keeps his promises. Nathan closed his eyes, a tear slipping down his cheeks. Sarah's voice echoed in his memory, her final words before she slipped away. Promise me you will protect her. Promise me. I kept my promise, Sarah. Nathan whispered to the empty room, to his sleeping daughter, to the ghost of the woman he had loved and lost. I finally kept my promise. Outside, the first light of dawn was breaking over Chicago, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. The storm had passed, the darkness was lifting, and Nathan crossed for the first time in 3 years, felt something that might have been peace. The weeks following that terrible night moved slowly like a river, finding its way through wounded land. Nathan did not return to work. He did not answer calls from investors or board members or the dozens of reporters who camped outside the Northridge gates hoping for a statement about the scandal. He simply stayed home with Emma, rebuilding what had been broken one small moment at a time. The morning after the arrests, Nathan found Emma sitting by the window in her bedroom, staring out at the garden where she had been forced to kneel so many nights. Her faithful teddy bear was pressed against her chest, its worn fur matted from tears and rain and endless clutching. She did not move when Nathan entered. She did not speak. She simply sat there watching the sunlight creep across the grass as if expecting the shadows to return at any moment. Nathan pulled a chair beside her and sat down. He did not say anything. He did not try to fill the silence with empty reassurances or promises he might not be able to keep. He simply sat with his daughter, letting her know through his presence that she was not alone anymore. After a long time, Emma spoke. Her voice was small and fragile, like a bird that had forgotten how to sing. Daddy, am I bad? Nathan felt his heart crack all over again. No, sweetheart, you are not bad. You have never been bad. But Victoria said I was. She said I was ungrateful and difficult, and that I made everyone's life harder. She said that was why Mommy Sarah got sick. Because I was too much trouble and God was punishing us. Nathan closed his eyes, fighting back the rage that threatened to consume him. Even now, even with Victoria in custody awaiting trial, her poison was still working its way through his daughter's soul. He knelt beside Emma's chair, taking her small hands in his. Listen to me very carefully, Emma. What Victoria told you was a lie. All of it, every single word. Your mother did not get sick because of you. She got sick because sometimes terrible things happen to good people, and there is nothing anyone can do to stop it. But I will tell you what is absolutely true. Your mother loved you more than anything in this entire world. The last thing she asked me to do was protect you. And I failed you, Emma. I left you alone with someone who hurt you, and I am so sorry. I am so incredibly sorry. Emma looked at him with eyes that had seen too much darkness for a 6-year-old. Her lower lip trembled. You came back for me. I should never have left in the first place. But you came back, Emma repeated, as if those 3 words contained all the meaning she needed. That is what matters, Daddy. She reached out and wrapped her small arms around his neck. Nathan gathered her close, feeling her heartbeat against his chest, feeling the warmth of her small body, feeling the weight of everything he had almost lost. They stayed like that for a long time, father and daughter healing in silence. That afternoon, Nathan gave Emma the gift he had found behind the filing cabinet. "I found this in my office," he said, gently placing the cellophane-wrapped teddy bear in her lap. "Your mommy bought it for your birthday before she went to heaven. She wanted you to have it." Emma stared at the bear with wide eyes, her fingers tracing the pink ribbon around its neck. She read the cards slowly, her lips moving with each word. "From Mommy Sarah," she whispered. "She did not forget me. She never forgot you, Emma. Not for a single moment. She loved you until her very last breath, and she loves you still." Emma hugged both bears to her chest, the old worn one that had been her companion through the darkness, and the new one that was her mother's final embrace. "Now they can be friends," she said softly. "Like Mommy Sarah is friends with the angels." 2 weeks after the arrest, the trial preparation began in earnest. Carter Mills had assembled an airtight case with video evidence, financial records, forensic analysis of the forged signatures, and testimony from multiple witnesses, including Sophie Clara and Mrs. Dorothy Chen. Nathan attended every meeting, reviewed every document, answered every question the prosecutors asked. He wanted to be present for all of it. He needed to see this through to the end. The pretrial hearings revealed the full scope of the conspiracy in devastating detail. Richard Kane had been planning the takeover for nearly 2 years, ever since a failed investment had left him facing massive personal debts that he could not repay. Rather than confess his problems to Nathan, his oldest friend and business partner, Richard had chosen betrayal. He had recruited Marcus Webb by discovering the lawyer's gambling addiction and offering to pay off his crushing debts in exchange for cooperation. Together, they had developed the scheme to drain Cross Holdings through fraudulent transfers to shell companies they controlled. Victoria was Richard's masterstroke. He had met her at a private club frequented by wealthy divorcees and quickly recognized her unique talents. She was beautiful, manipulative, and utterly without conscience. She had married 2 wealthy men before Nathan, extracting significant settlements from both through a combination of charm and calculated cruelty. Richard had introduced her to Nathan at the charity gala, knowing that a grieving widower with a young daughter would be vulnerable to a woman who seemed caring and maternal. Victoria had played her role perfectly, winning Nathan's trust while secretly reporting his movements and mental state to Richard throughout their relationship. The abuse of Emma had served multiple purposes in their scheme. It kept Nathan off balance emotionally, constantly worried about his daughter, distracted from the financial irregularities occurring within his company. It gave Victoria a tool for control, a way to manipulate both the child and the household staff through fear. And if things went wrong, Emma could be used as a hostage or a bargaining chip. Nathan listened to all of this testimony with a face carved from stone. Inside, he was burning with a rage that would take years to fully extinguish. The trial began on a gray Monday morning in the federal courthouse of Chicago. The gallery was packed with reporters, investors, former employees, and curious spectators hoping to witness the downfall of the people who had nearly destroyed one of the city's most prominent families. Nathan sat in the front row wearing a dark suit and an expression that revealed nothing of the turmoil within. Beside him, Carter Mills reviewed notes on a legal pad with the focused intensity that had made him legendary in law enforcement circles. Behind them, Rebecca Hayes had flown in from the newly reorganized Chicago office to provide testimony about the financial irregularities she had discovered. Victoria was brought in first. She had aged visibly in the weeks since her arrest, her face gaunt and pale, her hair limp and unstyled, her designer clothes replaced by the plain attire of an incarcerated defendant. She glanced at Nathan as she was led to her seat, and for a moment her old defiance flickered in her eyes like a dying ember. Then she looked away and the flicker died. Richard Kane entered next, looking like a man who had not slept properly in weeks. His expensive suit hung loosely on his diminished frame, and his eyes had the hollow look of someone who had finally understood the full consequences of his choices. He did not look at Nathan at all. Marcus Webb came last, pale and visibly trembling, clearly the weakest link in the conspiracy. He had already attempted to negotiate a plea deal in exchange for testimony against his co-conspirators, but the prosecution had rejected his initial offers as insufficient. The trial lasted 4 days. Carter presented the video evidence first. The courtroom watched in horrified silence as Victoria slapped Emma across the face, as Marcus forged signatures in Nathan's study, as Richard discussed the contingency plan that involved harming a child if necessary to protect their scheme. Several jurors wiped tears from their eyes during the footage. One older woman in the jury box had to leave the room entirely during the video of Emma crying alone in the dark hallway, whispering to her dead mother for help. Sophie took the stand on the second day. She described what she had witnessed during her 2 weeks in the household with quiet dignity and unwavering honesty. The way Victoria treated Emma, the late-night meetings in the basement, the constant atmosphere of fear that pervaded the mansion. I could not stay silent. Sophie's voice was steady despite the emotion visible in her eyes. I have a younger sister who was abused when we were children. I know what it does to a person, how it breaks something inside them that takes years to repair. When I saw Emma suffering the same way, I knew I had to help, even if it cost me my job, even if it put me in danger. Some things are more important than safety. Mrs. Dorothy Chen testified on the third day. The elderly woman walked slowly to the witness stand with the help of a cane, her hands trembling, but her voice surprisingly clear and strong. I have lived next to that house for 20 years. I knew Nathan's first wife, Sarah. She was a kind woman, a good mother. When she passed, I watched Nathan fall apart with grief. I watched him try to put himself back together by working constantly by filling the emptiness with success. And then Victoria came, and I thought perhaps he had found someone to help him heal. Mrs. Chen paused, her weathered face tightening with remembered anger. But then I started seeing things that troubled me deeply. The little girl standing on the porch for hours even in the rain. The shouting that echoed across the yard. The way Emma flinched whenever Victoria came near her. I knew something was terribly wrong, but I did not know what to do about it. I am just an old woman. Who would believe me over a wealthy socialite with powerful friends? She straightened in her chair, looking directly at the jury with fierce determination. But I could not stay silent any longer. Not after I saw Emma collapse in front of the gate. A child should not look that afraid in her own home. A child should not have to suffer because adults are too blind or too selfish to protect her. So I wrote a letter. I did not know if it would reach Nathan in time. I did not know if he would believe me. But I had to try, because sometimes trying is all we can do. The courtroom was completely silent when she finished. Even the defense attorneys had nothing to say in response. On the fourth day, the defendants were given the opportunity to make statements before sentencing. Marcus Webb went first, his voice shaking as he attempted to minimize his role in the conspiracy. I was desperate, he said, wringing his hands before him. I owed money to dangerous people. Richard offered me a way out, and I took it without thinking about the consequences. I never meant for anyone to get hurt. I never touched the child. I just signed some papers. The prosecutor's response was swift and devastating. You forged the signature of a man who trusted you implicitly on documents designed to steal his company. You participated in meetings where violence against a 6-year-old girl was discussed as a contingency plan. You stood by while a child was abused and did nothing whatsoever to stop it. Your hands may not have struck Emma Cross, Mr. Webb, but they are far from clean. Marcus had no answer to that accusation. Richard Kane's statement was longer and more calculated. He spoke of the pressures of business, of investments gone wrong, of debts that threatened to destroy him. He framed himself as a victim of circumstances, a man who had made difficult choices under impossible conditions. Nathan and I built Cross Holdings together from nothing. Richard said, his voice tight with false emotion. We were brothers in every way that mattered. But somewhere along the way, the company stopped being ours and became his alone. Every success was Nathan's success. Every failure was somehow my failure. I gave 20 years of my life to that company, and what did I have to show for it? A junior partnership and a mountain of debt that grew larger every year. He looked at Nathan for the first time since the trial began, his eyes filled with a mixture of resentment and regret. I am not proud of what I did, but you need to understand, Nathan. I was drowning, and you were too busy flying around the world collecting accolades to notice your partner was in trouble. Nathan met his gaze without flinching. He did not respond. He did not need to. The evidence spoke louder than any words he could offer. Victoria's statement was the shortest and the most chilling. She stood at the podium, her spine straight, despite her circumstances, her face composed in an expression of wounded dignity that fooled no one. I loved Nathan, she said, her voice soft and almost convincing. I tried to be a good wife and a good mother to his daughter. Emma was a difficult child troubled by her mother's death, resistant to any kind of authority. I used discipline because that is what children need. Perhaps I was too strict at times. Perhaps I made mistakes. But I never intended to harm anyone. Everything I did for this family. She turned to face Nathan directly, her eyes cold. You were never home, Nathan. You left me alone with a grieving child in a household to manage while you chased deals on the other side of the world. If Emma suffered, it is because you abandoned her. Not me. I was the one who stayed. Nathan listened to her twisted version of events with a face of stone. He had expected this. Victoria would never accept responsibility for her actions. She would twist the truth until she became the victim and everyone else became the villain. But the jury was not fooled by her performance. The verdict came the following Monday. The courtroom fell silent as the judge read the decisions in a grave voice. Victoria Cross was found guilty of child abuse, child endangerment, conspiracy to commit fraud, and accessory to financial crimes. She was sentenced to 6 years in federal prison with the possibility of parole after 4 years contingent on good behavior and psychiatric evaluation. Marcus Webb was found guilty of fraud, forgery, and conspiracy. He was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison with credit for time served and cooperation with authorities during the investigation. Richard Kane was found guilty of masterminding the entire conspiracy, including fraud, forgery, embezzlement, and conspiracy to commit additional crimes. As the architect of the scheme, he received the harshest sentence, 12 years in federal prison with no possibility of parole for the first 8 years. The gallery erupted in murmurs and whispered conversations. Reporters rushed out to file their stories. Cameras flashed despite the bailiff's repeated warnings. Nathan sat quietly through all of it, feeling nothing that resembled satisfaction. Justice had been served, but it did not undo what had been done. It did not erase the months of suffering his daughter had endured. It did not bring back the innocence that had been stolen from her. As the defendants were led away, Richard paused beside Nathan's row. The guards allowed him a moment, perhaps understanding that some words needed to be spoken before doors closed forever. Was it worth it? Nathan asked quietly. 20 years of friendship destroyed for money you will never get to spend. Richard's face twisted with something that might have been regret or might have been resentment. You will never understand, Nathan. You have always had everything handed to you. The brilliant ideas, the lucky breaks, the beautiful wife who loved you unconditionally. I had to fight for every scrap while you collected accolades and magazine covers. This was supposed to be my turn, my chance to finally win. Nathan shook his head slowly. You could have told me you were struggling. I would have helped you, Richard. I would have done anything for you. You were my brother in every way that mattered. Richard laughed, a bitter sound that echoed in the emptying courtroom. That is the problem, Nathan. You still do not get it. I did not want your help. I wanted what was mine. The guards led him away. Nathan watched until his former friend disappeared through the side door, and then he stood up, buttoned his jacket, and walked out into the pale sunshine. Carter was waiting for him on the courthouse steps. It is done, the older man said. They will be processed and transferred to their respective facilities within the week. The financial damages will be recovered through the seizure of their assets. Cross Holdings is safe and will recover. Nathan nodded, but his mind was already elsewhere. I am selling my shares, he said. I am stepping down from the company entirely. Carter raised an eyebrow in surprise. That is a significant decision, Nathan. Are you certain? I have never been more certain of anything in my life. Nathan looked out at the city skyline, at the towers of glass and steel he had spent 20 years helping to build. I missed my daughter's childhood chasing money and success. I left her alone with monsters because I was too busy to pay attention to what was happening in my own home. I am not making that mistake again. What will you do instead? Nathan smiled, the first real smile he had allowed himself in weeks. Something that actually matters. 6 months later, the Northridge mansion was completely unrecognizable. The cold, sterile elegance that Victoria had cultivated was gone, entirely replaced by warmth and color and light. The walls were covered with children's artwork, bright paintings of suns and rainbows, and stick figure families holding hands. The formal living room had been converted into a playroom filled with toys and books and soft cushions for reading. The garden where Emma had knelt in the rain now bloomed with flowers that the children planted themselves. Nathan had sold most of his shares in Cross Holdings, retaining only enough to ensure his voice would be heard on matters of company ethics and charitable giving. The proceeds had been used to transform his home into something entirely new. Little Sun Haven. That was the name Emma had chosen for it. I want it to be a place where every kid can feel happy. She had explained, her small face serious with the weight of her vision. Where nobody yells at them or makes them stand in the rain, where they can play and laugh and not be scared anymore. Nathan had made her vision real. Little Sun Haven was now a licensed residential treatment center for children who had experienced abuse and trauma. It housed up to 40 children at any given time, providing them with safe shelter, professional counseling, quality education, and most importantly, unconditional love. Sophie had been hired as the head of childcare, her personal experience with abuse making her uniquely qualified to connect with the children in their care. Clara remained as the senior medical staff, her gentle presence a comfort to kids who had learned to fear adults. Mrs. Dorothy Chen came to visit every week despite her age and declining health. She would sit in the garden with the children, telling them stories about kindness and courage and the importance of speaking up when something was wrong. "You saved my daughter's life with a letter," Nathan told her during one of her visits. "I can never repay you for what you did." Mrs. Chen smiled, her weathered face creasing with warmth. "You do not owe me anything, Nathan. You were always a good man at heart. You just lost your way for a while. We all do sometimes. What matters is finding your way back." The dedication ceremony for Little Sun Haven took place on a bright Saturday afternoon in late spring. The sun hung low in the sky, painting the grounds in shades of gold and amber. Children ran across the lawn, their laughter filling the air like music. Nathan stood on the front porch watching the scene with a peace he had not felt in years. Rebecca had flown in from the Chicago office, which she now ran as CEO of Cross Holdings. Carter Mills leaned against a pillar nearby, a rare smile softening his weathered features. Emma emerged from the house carrying a small bronze plaque. She walked carefully across the grass, her faded teddy bear tucked under one arm, as always, her face bright with excitement and pride. "Are you ready, Daddy?" Nathan knelt beside her, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. "I am ready, sweetheart. Are you?" Emma nodded solemnly. Then she walked to the front gate where a small crowd of supporters, donors, and friends had gathered. The plaque was simple, engraved with words that Emma had helped choose. "Little Sun Haven, where every child is loved." Emma reached up on her tiptoes, carefully mounting the plaque on the gatepost. The afternoon sun caught the bronze surface, making the words gleam like a promise written in gold. The crowd applauded warmly. Several people wiped tears from their eyes. Mrs. Dorothy Chen made her way forward, leaning on Sophie's arm for support. She carried a small gift wrapped in simple paper. "This is for you, Emma," she said, pressing it into the girl's hands, "for being brave enough to survive and kind enough to want to help others." Emma opened the gift carefully. Inside was a small silver pendant in the shape of a sun with a tiny diamond at its center. "A little sun for my little son," Mrs. Chen said softly. "Never forget how much light you have inside you, child." Emma hugged the old woman tightly, the pendant clutched in her small fist. "Thank you," she whispered, "for writing the letter, for helping Daddy find me." Mrs. Chen kissed the top of her head gently. "Thank you for being strong enough to wait for him." As the ceremony concluded and the guests began to mingle, Nathan found himself standing alone by the garden fence. The same fence he had once looked over to see his daughter kneeling in the rain. The same spot where his world had shattered and slowly begun to rebuild. A small hand slipped into his. Emma stood beside him, her worn teddy bear in one arm, her new sun pendant gleaming against her dress. "Daddy, are we happy now?" Nathan looked down at his daughter, at the light that had returned to her eyes, at the smile that had taken so long to come back. He thought about Sarah, about the promise he had made, about all the ways he had failed, and all the ways he was trying to make things right. "Yes, sweetheart," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "We are happy." Emma leaned against his leg, looking out at the garden, where children were playing at the house that had been transformed from a place of pain into a sanctuary of hope. "I think Mommy Sarah would like this place." Nathan felt tears prick his eyes. "I think she would love it." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and orange and gold. The sounds of children laughing drifted across the lawn. Somewhere inside, Sophie was organizing dinner. Chen was telling stories to a group of fascinated kids. Carter was discussing security improvements with the staff. It was not the life Nathan had planned. It was not the empire he had spent 20 years building. It was something smaller, something quieter, something infinitely more precious. It was a family. 1 year later, Little Sun Haven had grown beyond anyone's expectations. The program had expanded to include day services, family counseling, and community outreach. Former residents returned to volunteer, sharing their stories of recovery and hope with children just beginning their own journeys toward healing. Nathan still lived on the grounds in a modest apartment attached to the main building. His days were filled with meetings about program development, fundraising events, and the endless details of running a nonprofit organization. But he always made time for Emma. Every morning they had breakfast together. Every evening they walked through the garden, checking on the flowers and talking about their days. Every night Nathan read her a story before bed, continuing a tradition that Victoria had tried to destroy but could never truly take away. Emma was thriving. The nightmares that had plagued her for months after Victoria's arrest had finally faded. She was doing well in school, making friends, learning to trust adults again. The little girl who had once written notes apologizing for disappointing her father now wrote stories about magical kingdoms where children were always safe and parents always came home. She still carried her teddy bears everywhere, the old worn one and the new one from her mother. Some wounds healed slowly. Some comforts were not easily surrendered. Nathan understood completely. He had his own comforts, his own wounds, his own slow process of healing. On the anniversary of Little Sun Haven's opening, a small celebration was held in the garden. It was a warm summer evening, fireflies beginning to blink in the gathering dusk. The children had made decorations, stringing colorful paper lanterns between the trees. Sophie had baked a massive cake shaped like a sun, its frosting gleaming yellow and gold. Nathan stood at the center of the gathering, Emma beside him, looking out at the faces of the people who had become his new family. 1 year ago, he began his voice carrying across the quiet garden. I was a man who had completely lost his way. I had spent so long chasing success that I forgot what success actually meant. I had built an empire, but lost my soul. And worst of all, I had failed to protect the person who mattered most to me. He looked down at Emma, who smiled up at him with eyes full of trust and love. My daughter saved me, not by doing anything extraordinary, but simply by being brave enough to survive until I found her. And an old woman named Dorothy Chen saved us both by having the courage to write a letter that no one else was willing to write. He paused his gaze, finding Mrs. Chen in the crowd. She was seated in a wheelchair now, her health declining, but her spirit undimmed. I cannot change the past. I cannot undo the harm that was done or recover the time that was lost. But I can choose what happens next. I can choose to build something meaningful with whatever years I have left. And I can choose to make sure that no child has to suffer the way my daughter suffered. Nathan lifted his glass of sparkling cider, the bubbles catching the last light of the setting sun. To Little Sun Haven, to second chances, and to the truth that it is never too late to become the person you were meant to be. The crowd raised their glasses in unison. Voices echoed across the garden. To Little Sun Haven. Emma tugged at her father's sleeve. He bent down to hear her whisper, I have something for you, Daddy. She pulled a folded piece of paper from her pocket. It was a drawing done in crayon showing two figures standing before an open gate. Behind the gate was a garden filled with flowers and children playing. Above it all, a bright yellow sun smiled down with gentle rays. At the bottom of the drawing, in Emma's careful handwriting, were words that made Nathan's breath catch in his throat. This gate is never locked. He stared at the drawing for a long moment, remembering another note. He had found a note that had read, I am sorry for disappointing you, Daddy. The contrast between that desperate apology and this hopeful declaration showed him just how far they had come together. This is beautiful, Emma. He managed, his voice rough with emotion. It is us, Emma explained, pointing to the figures with pride. That is you and me walking into the garden. And all those kids are the ones we are helping. And the sun is Mommy Sarah, watching over everyone and keeping us safe. Nathan gathered his daughter into his arms, holding her tight against his chest. I love you, Emma, more than anything in this world. I love you too, Daddy, Emma whispered back. Forever and ever, no matter what. They stood together as the fireflies multiplied and the stars began to emerge overhead. The sounds of celebration continued around them. Children laughed, adults talked, music played softly from somewhere inside the house. And Nathan Cross, the man who had once valued money above all else, looked around at everything he had built and realized that he had finally found what he had been searching for all along. Not success, not power, not the validation of strangers. Just this: a daughter who loved him, a home filled with hope, a purpose that gave meaning to every single day. That night after the celebration ended and the children were tucked into bed, Nathan walked through the quiet halls of Little Sun Haven. He paused at each doorway, listening to the peaceful breathing of children who had once known only fear and pain. They were safe now. They were loved. They were healing. He ended his walk at Emma's room. She was asleep, both teddy bears clutched against her chest, a small smile on her peaceful face. The sun pendant from Mrs. Chen lay on her nightstand, catching the moonlight that streamed through the window. Nathan sat down in the chair beside her bed, the same chair where he had spent so many nights after bringing her home, watching over her, protecting her from nightmares that no child should ever have to face. "I kept my promise, Sarah," he whispered to the empty room. "It took me longer than it should have. I made terrible mistakes along the way, but I kept it." He reached out and brushed a strand of hair from Emma's forehead. "She is going to be okay. Our little girl is going to be okay." For a moment, Nathan could almost feel Sarah's presence beside him. Not a ghost, not a vision, just a warmth that settled over his heart like a gentle hand. And in that warmth, he found the peace he had been seeking for so long. Outside, the stars wheeled overhead in their ancient patterns. The lights of Chicago glittered on the distant horizon. And in a house that had once been a prison of cruelty and fear, dozens of children slept safely, dreaming of better tomorrows. Some people spend their whole lives searching for happiness without ever finding it. They climb mountains of achievement only to discover emptiness at the summit. They accumulate wealth only to realize that money cannot buy the things that matter most. Nathan had been one of those people. He had spent 20 years building an empire while his soul grew cold and empty. He had sacrificed his presence in his daughter's life for meetings and deals. He had trusted the wrong people and ignored the warnings of his own heart. But he had been given a second chance. A letter from an elderly neighbor, a daughter who forgave him despite everything, a community that welcomed his desire to make amends. Not everyone gets a second chance. Nathan knew exactly how lucky he was. And in the end, perhaps that is what life is really about. Not avoiding suffering, but finding meaning within it. Not escaping darkness, but learning to carry light through it. Not achieving perfection, but embracing the beautiful imperfection of being human. Nathan Cross had learned these lessons the hard way, but he had learned them, and he would spend the rest of his life sharing them with others. Because that is what fathers do. That is what family means. And that is how light conquers darkness. Not all at once, not dramatically, but gently, persistently, one small sun at a time. The end. And that is the story of Nathan and little Emma, from the darkness of betrayal and abuse to the light of love and redemption. A story about how people can fall and still rise again simply by having a small hand to hold on to. Which character touched your heart the most? Nathan, the father who learned that success means nothing without family. Emma, the brave little girl who survived and helped others heal. Or Mrs. Dorothy Chen, the elderly neighbor who proved that one letter can change everything. And which moment moved you most deeply? When Nathan found Emma kneeling in the rain. When he discovered the birthday bear that her mother had left for her. When Emma gave him the drawing of the gate that is never locked. Share your thoughts below. Because stories like this remind us of something important. It is never too late to do the right thing. Courage can come from the most unexpected places. Love is stronger than cruelty. Hope is stronger than despair. Thank you for listening. Good night. Sleep well. And remember, every child deserves to be loved. Every person deserves a second chance. And every story deserves an ending filled with hope.